Yo, what's up everybody, Swillow here, and today I'm going to be making the video that everybody keeps asking me, like in my streams or just all over, is Godfall worth it? And my answer to that is yes, it is worth it. So I beat the game's campaign, I've invested a lot of time into the end game, I've made a cool build, I've reached max level, like I've just spent a lot of time playing this game, so this isn't going to be like a 1 hour or 3 hour or 5 hour impression. This is going to be like I've put a lot of time into this game. So first off, this game does two things and only two things: combat and the loot slash customization. And these two things are done incredibly well, but that's all it does. Like if you're here for a cinematic story or like a mix of different elements in exploration and all of that, that's not really what you're going to get here. I mean, there's a story, there is exploration and stuff like that, but you'll quickly learn that all of these things exist just to really push you into combat and collecting loot. And these two components of the game are done really, really well, and I'm going to explain why. So first up, with combat, the gameplay has this interesting feel and control scheme to it. It's kind of like a hybrid between an action game and a shooter, and it does take some time to get used to. Also, the game doesn't have traditional chains or canceling similar to what you may be familiar with in other action games like Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden or Bayonetta or whatever. So you do have to get used to how you mix all your actions and what the game allows you to do and the restrictions and the different flow to that. But all of it really comes together the more you play the game and the more you just get accustomed to the controls and such. And the cool thing about the game is that it really feels simple at its core, and it does start incredibly simple, but as you get further and you get more skills and you start to get loot that you like, and you start to just craft the gameplay in a way that you like or enjoy or feel strong, the game just gets better and better and better, and it feels a lot more dynamic, even though at its core it's just built on a very simple system of like dodge, block, light attack, heavy attack. But you start to get command skills and all these other little attributes that mix into it and give you more flexibility so that you can play how you want to play, which is really cool. And the execution barrier of the game is really satisfying. Some of it is just getting familiar with the game in general because it plays really different from other action games like I mentioned. Some other stuff is actually just requires good execution, like knowing how to dodge enemy attacks, exposing openings, and they have something like a weak point system, right? So you have like a reticle on screen where you can actually aim at enemy's weak point after they attack and they expose themselves, and if you hit it, you get bonus damage, you can get stagger and stuff like that. So this is a really cool, interesting mechanic that's kind of exclusive to this game since you have the shooter-like control and aiming system. And it's mechanics like this that help keep the game engaging in the long run because they constantly challenge you to like push your limits as a player in terms of movement and adaptation and positioning and all of that. So that's what I really enjoy about the game, is it has a satisfying execution barrier to learn and execute. Next up, the enemy design. Like the enemy design plays such a big role in keeping this game satisfying in the long run. And there's two reasons why. First, there's a good variety of enemies, right? There's no like palette swaps or weird stuff like that. Like each enemy in the game is its own unique enemy, and you're going to approach them differently in terms of attacking them, defending their attacks, and so on. Learning parry timing, learning dodge timings, learning how to expose their weak points and stuff like that. So it's really cool how they have this enemy structure. Like they have a good variety of enemies that all are completely different to fight against. And this really helps a lot because let's look at a recent game that just came out, like Avengers, right? Avengers is pretty similar to this game in terms of the action loot mix. But the thing with Avengers is, you know, like the enemy variety was not there. You were literally fighting like 5 enemy types forever, for hours. And there was like 2 or 3 bosses in the game. Like there just wasn't, it didn't feel like there was anything, any sort of variety at all. And even though this game has a repetitive structure, they actually have just enough different things going on so that you don't feel like you're just seeing too much of the same thing too frequently, right? So there's a good balance of how much you see something and how engaging it is to actually fight against, which really helps a lot. And then the boss fights. The boss fights are, they're good and they're frustrating, and there's a lot of things about them, but they're pretty challenging. It really depends on the situation, you know, what difficulty you're playing on and stuff like that. But these boss fights are really challenging, like learning their patterns, learning how to dodge their attacks, learning how to hit their weak points, making sure you get the parry on their blue attack and stuff like that. Like all of this stuff, the more, even if you keep playing the game for a long time, it still can be pretty challenging, especially because once you get to end game, the same bosses you were fighting keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Like they keep getting new attacks, they get like new effects. So these bosses keep evolving the more you progress into the end game, which means once you learn how to fight this boss one way, now you gotta learn how to fight him again in this powered up state. And it's this constant learning process that keeps it like really stimulating, challenging, and also gets you a little frustrated at some. Like these bosses don't play. If you've seen my streams, you've seen me like a couple times just kind of fight some of these bosses, and yo, they can be nutty. But when you beat them or you learn how to fight against them, like it's very satisfying. And next up we have the loot, right? So the loot is really, really cool in this game. When you're just playing through the campaign and stuff, you may not notice how cool it is, because this is like a sort of a problem with any loot driven game, is in the early levels you keep leveling up so fast and getting new loot so fast that it's hard to make a proper build, right? You're cycling in new equipment constantly. So this game doesn't avoid that problem. Like you're definitely going to be outdating your equipment so quickly in the early game that it's hard to make a cool and functional build. So the loot doesn't seem like anything special besides just maybe picking something that looks neat here and there, or a weapon style you like. But it's once you hit the end game and you're like, oh, this is the weapon I like, oh, this is the skill I like, oh, this is the accessories I like. Once you reach that point where you start seeing things that you like and you start knowing what you want to do and you start getting like in-game ready equipment, then this is where the loot just goes crazy. Like the things you can do open up considerably, and not even just like statistically, but you get cool effects too. So like there's this hammer, and when you use a weapon skill, it puts down a time field, and anything in that time field, even a boss, gets slowed down. They get reduced to like probably like 20-30% of their normal speed. Maybe not that low, but they get pretty slow. And when you put down that time field, like that gives you time to compose yourself, or it gives you time to just wail on them and go absolutely crazy with like a big damage setup. It just lets you do a lot of stuff. And there's other weapons with cool effects too, like weapons that lay minefields and you have to slide into them to detonate them and stuff like that. Like there's really cool gear effects that you can get that really change up your approach to playing the game, and it makes these simple actions a lot more elaborate and dynamic. So it's really cool how they structured everything and how you can customize your character, and how they have such a simple core combat system, but they build all of these little elements and mechanics and abilities around it so that each of these simple actions start to gain more weight and more variety and more interesting elements in general as you play and based on how you load out your character. So it's a really cool feeling, to be honest. Like it's a lot of fun to build yourself up. that's it really. Like, this game, it's so simple, it's so straightforward, and that's what makes it such a good game. You shouldn't buy this game if you're looking for like this big dynamic AAA cinematic experience where you're gonna get this crazy immersive world and story and all of these like interesting gameplay components that you may only see once here and there. But this game is just more nitty gritty, no BS. Just get in there and do your thing and have fun. The only problem I really have with this game is the multiplayer, right? So this game is very online driven to the point that you can't even play the game unless you have an internet connection, which is kind of intense. It gave me the impression that this game was going to be all about playing online with people, but you can't. There's no public matchmaking. The only way you can play online is if you have friends playing the game and you invite them into your game. And, you know, this is like a unique situation, but the PS5 just came out. Like, I'm the only person I know that has a PS5. Like, all my friends are trying to get one, they can't get one. So I can't play with my friends, you know? I mean, I could probably go into like Discord or whatever and find some random people to friend up, but that's a lot of work to play a game that feels like they wanted you to play multiplayer and they made it not accessible at all. And some of the end game especially, like, even though I did everything solo so far, there's definitely some situations where you're like, bro, this feels like it was made for multiplayer. Like, some of the bosses, the way they grow and the effects they get and all of the enemy add-ons they get, like, it starts to become overwhelming to fight solo. I mean, you can still pull it off, but it definitely gives a sense of, this is probably supposed to be done in multiplayer, but you gotta do what you gotta do, right? So that's like my only major complaint is the online. It's for some people like me, it's non-existent right now. You know, like, I would literally be playing online all the time, but I can't because I can only play with friends, and none of my friends have a PS5 yet. So here we are. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you some helpful insight into what this game is about. I definitely do think it's a good game. You know, like, all of the complaints about it are pretty accurate, but if you're coming into the game for what it is and you enjoy what it's doing, like, you're gonna have a good time. I'm having a good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of updates or DLC or whatever it's gonna get. And hopefully if they allow us to play online publicly and not just with friends, I would like that a lot. Honestly, that's like the first thing I would want them to do, is allow us to play online with anybody. If they do that, like, that's gonna amp the game up even more for me. Anyways, thanks for watching. Peace.